Can I just check that everybody can hear me?
Yes. Yes, sir.
Thank you. Can I just double check that the live stream's working? Thank you very much. I'll make the usual reminder just to make sure that anybody's electronic devices are switched to silent, please. So there's a couple of procedural matters I'd like to discuss before we go into hearing Mr. Littlewood's evidence. The first one is about the programme. Now, the mention that Clare Hall may not be participating, but also acknowledging the fact that we're not going to know that for certain. I'm just going to set out the following. So some of these things we've already discussed and I think have been said, but just for the avoidance of any doubt. So from myself and Mr. Clegg, we're confirming that we're not expecting Clare Hall to attend on the Thursday, the 23rd. And just to give everybody certainty for travel arrangements and so on, we are proposing that Thursday, the 23rd, would be a non-sitting day, and along with Friday the 24th being a non-sitting day. As mentioned, Mr. Kelly, I think it was quite clear that there was no point in hearing from Mr. Kelly until after the local plan had reached the next stage. In terms of Mr. Kelly, I think one of the issues was that Mr. Kelly's advocate wasn't available the week of the 11th. So our proposal is, understanding that Mr. Kelly was going to be available on the 4th and 5th, was to, although we were hoping that week would be an entirely non-sitting week, our proposal is to call Mr. Kelly in week 6 on the morning of the Tuesday, and then on the afternoon of the Tuesday and the Wednesday, myself and Mr. Clegg will use that time for any unaccompanied site visits. So availability, we anticipate, from other parties would only need to be probably for the morning, assuming that hearing Mr. Kelly's evidence and any questions that people have for Mr. Kelly, we will be able to deal with in the morning. In terms of other implications, I think, as we agreed yesterday, the expectation is that Mr. Ellis will be called on the morning of Tuesday, the 21st, when we resume next week, and that we'll still hear the other parties that we'd identified to hear on that day. Probably more likely to be in the afternoon, I imagine. And Mrs. Vincent, I understand, has probably been in contact, or if not, will be in contact with those parties to try and make sure that they're not too inconvenienced in terms of the times that they attend. So what that then means is, and again, I think this was mentioned early in the week. There's a number of witnesses from the applicant that we've either not heard from yet, or were intended to be recalled for Clare Hall evidence, but because of the nature of their evidence and the fact that when we first heard them, we'd done so on the basis that we sort of didn't deal with any issues around Clare Hall or in the Clare Hall vicinity at that time. So what we'd expect to hear is to hear from Mr. Lewis and Mr. Southern on Tuesday, the 11th of November, and also hear from recalled Mr. Saunders and Mr. Wilson. I would hope, given that, and again, this is obviously on the understanding that Clare Hall won't be participating, that we'd be able to hear from all four of those on the 11th. Given that, I think some of them would probably be evidence in chief and questions from either interested parties or myself and Mr. Clegg. That would mean that I would expect that on the Wednesday we could call Mr. Franklin, so that would be on the 12th. And then again, just looking at the times there, we may be able to also start with Mr. Sensical on the 12th, but we'd also have the 13th of November available for that as well, as I understand it. That, I think, would then mean that we could leave the final week more or less as it's set out on the current programme. In that we'd still need to do accompanied site visits, and I think myself and Mr. Clegg would still intend to do accompanied site visits on Tuesday the 18th. Given that there's probably we'd need to spend less time at the eastern end in light of Clare Hall's position, we may be able to complete all our accompanied site visits on the Tuesday. However, we'll keep the Wednesday available for that as well, because I'm conscious daylight is getting shorter and shorter this time of year, so we may well need to do that. So that would leave the Thursday morning for dealing with conditions and a round table about the order itself. And then also on Thursday, closings from all parties apart from the applicant, and then the applicant's closing on the Friday. I realise I've set out quite a lot there. I think on paper I think it looks a bit more straightforward than it might have sounded on paper. I've also asked Mrs. Vincent to draw up a draft on that, and I'm hoping that all parties will be able to accommodate that and be available. We have taken account of the information that's been passed to Mrs. Vincent about availability, and obviously, as I've done before, I'd encourage all parties to do their best to try and make that programme work. I've also asked Mrs. Vincent to leave the current programme up on the website, because there are obviously, if Clare Hall are still participating, then it'll be the current programme, but we will need to make adjustments to that, because obviously we've said that we're not going to hear from Clare Hall next week. So that will mean that when we resumed, there'd have to be some changes there. So just on that, are there any comments about that suggestion on the programme?
No, all seems entirely sensible from our perspective. So the only comment I would make is that if, and it's not really for me, it's for Ms. Trautkin-Reitner, but if Mr. Kelly is going to give evidence on that Tuesday, which seems entirely sensible and very happy about that, I wonder on the programme whether it just gives an indication to members of the public that might happen in case they were interested. Otherwise, they might suddenly find that Mr. Kelly's giving evidence that day and they weren't aware of it. Perhaps not now, but at some stage. Yeah,
well, I'm hoping. I don't think it's going to happen immediately, but hopefully Mrs. Vincent will be able to provide we'll call it a parallel programme, which will be put on the website so that everyone can see that. But yeah, thank you, Mr. Cameron. That's a good point, because obviously I am expecting that some people might want to ask Mr. Kelly questions. Ms. Trautkin-Reitner, obviously Mr. Kelly is your witness. Can I just confirm that works for you?
Yes, it does, and I'm very grateful to you both for accommodating that. I know it's awkward to come that week, but yes, very grateful for you accommodating my availability.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Parker?
No comment from me, thank you.
And in terms of when we've mentioned we're expecting other witnesses, I mean, I think, I'm not sure, I'll have to check my list, but in terms of the people we're hearing from, I don't think they're ones that you're wanting to cross-examine anyway, are they?
Some of them are, but they're the ones who aren't moving, as in Mr. Franklin and Mr. Sensical, who had been programmed anyway for that day, but no, not the Clare Hall.
Apology, yeah, I should have been clear on that. I was talking about Mr. Lewis, Mr. Southern, Mr. Saunders and Mr. Wilson.
No, sir.
Thank you. Okay, well, thank you very much. And yeah, appreciate your assistance with helping that to work.
I've just got one point when you've dealt with everything.
Oh, okay, yeah. Just on documents again, just so that we're clear what's happening. I'm just confirming that there's 3 documents that have come in over the past few days. I'm just confirming they're ones that myself and Mr. Clegg have accepted. One was a plan of the Madingley Wood SSSI. What's happened is the one that was on the website, I think, was covered in solid blue. It was a bit a bit blurry. It's been replaced with one in green that shows it slightly clearer. I don't think there should be any issues about that. My understanding is that's the one that's been published. The applicant provided a note on nitrogen dioxide receptors in response to a query of just being very clear where there was two receptors who the applicant's evidence identified as being sort of particularly affected, and we asked for clarification for where they were. The applicant's provided a note, and the key part of that note is the plan on the last page, which actually just clearly shows where those two receptors are located. And finally, the CPPF have provided a clear drawing of their land holdings in the vicinity of the order. So that's very helpful, because I think it is a bit clearer than what I'll call the green plan, which had hatchings and things on. So thank you very much for that. Are there any other procedural matters before I invite Mr. Parker to call your witness?
Just one more on document.
Oh, sorry. No, Mr. Clegg said he's got something to say. Sorry, buddy.
Sorry, my one was just going to be about Mr. Littlewood's additional document, which I don't think we've mentioned explicitly. I hope that's made its way through to you. It was just to request that that's formally accepted by you.
Yes, apologies. I should have mentioned that. And yes. Although, is it on the website?
It wasn't when I checked 30 seconds ago, but no. I'm not sure whether...
It's because I haven't asked Mrs. Vincent to put it on yet, that's why. Thank you.
Okay.
Mr. Clegg.
Yes, Mr. Parker, just one very quick point. I asked yesterday about how we should refer to Professor Hurst. Have you agreed something with her?
We're waiting to hear back from her. I will ask for that to be chased up. She was deciding, I think, how she wanted to.
Okay,
but we'll come back to you. I do have that on the list.
Thank you very much.
Right. Unless there's anything else that anybody wants to raise, Mr. Parker, I'll ask you to invite your witness, and just so that people are aware, we'll be taking a few more small breaks than perhaps usual this morning, but I'm going to leave that in Mr. Parker's hands as to when those occur. Although we will be looking for a mid-morning break at some stage, and perhaps you could indicate when you think that might be an appropriate time.
Yes, thank you. I'm working on the basis that we're going to be going for about 45 minutes. So yes, I will. Hopefully prompted by Ms. Gisby, we will pause at appropriate points.
Yeah, just so that myself and Mr. Clegg aren't going to prompt you, we've delegated that to you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Good morning, Mr. Littlewood. You are James Littlewood. You have given a proof of evidence in this matter, and there is also a note that you produced by way of the note that has been produced by Mr. Sensical, which I referred to just a moment ago. But I would like to introduce you, please, by reference to your proof of evidence. And in section 1, you explain that you are the Chief Executive of Cambridge Past, Present and Future CPPF, and you've held that post since December 2016. In paragraph 1.2, you explain that you have a degree in geography and an MSc in countryside management, and you have worked for 30 years in the environmental and planning sectors, where you have worked to improve landscape, heritage and the environment for a range of charities, and you give examples of the charities there at 1.2. Is that all correct?
That's correct, yes.
Thank you. Pausing there, I'd like to just ask you to explain a little bit more about you personally, your experience and your qualifications, please.
Yes, I mean, I'm a generalist, I think it's probably fair to say. So I don't have specialist qualifications in some of the topics that I'm covering today, but through my work experience, I've gained experience in planning, landscape, heritage, ecology, working in and around local government in planning for over 30 years. I think it's also fair to say that in relation to the inquiry, because we have limited funds to employ experts in all of the fields that we're covering, it was considered that given I have a background in those work experience background in those topics that I would step forward, as it were, and try and cover those as using my work experience to do that.
Thank you. And then turning then to CPPF, can you say a little bit to the inspectors about what CPPF is, what it does in the area?
Yeah, sure. We're a local charity, a civic, environmental and heritage charity. We are nearly 100 years old. We are a membership charity with over 2,000 members. We have a staff team of around 10 full-time equivalent people, and we're supported by between 100 and 200 volunteers.
And we've referred to the plan which shows the CPPF land holdings, and that plan is before the inquiry. Can you just explain to a little bit, inspectors, how you use the land that you own in the vicinity of the scheme?
Yeah, so the land was purchased in the 1930s. Originally we purchased around 400 acres of land. That was in order to protect the setting of the historic city and the historic villages of Coton, Grantchester and Madingley. Since that time, it's continued to serve that purpose. It's also let for farmland, which helps to support our charity's work. But since the late 90s, we've been bringing forward a very ambitious plan to create a large area for nature and people on the western edge of Cambridge to serve the growing population and to tackle the decline in nature that's been occurring across the wider countryside. So that's currently referred to as a Coton Countryside Reserve, but we do have an ambition to sort of use all of that land, if we can, to create a large new nature reserve on the western edge of Cambridge.
Thank you. And if you can just take up the plan, just so that we're clear about that. It is CD. What's do you have the CD reference for the new plan?
Jack, I'm happy to refer to the green plan as it is in the proof.
I mean, if I can help, it's CD 29 54 2.
Yes, I think that's my problem. I don't think that version has quite made it onto the website yet.
Yeah, it is.
It is?
Yeah.
Oh, my list is out of date then, sorry. Here it is. Oh, there we go. Refresh.
So where are we? Sorry,
So it's CD 29 54 -2.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Oh.
You got that plan. So we can see there the village of Coton. We can see the red outlines showing the land holdings. So when you're talking about the area of the Coton Countryside Reserve, are you just able to explain by reference to this plan what you're talking about?
Yeah, the initial phase of that work sort of focused on the, I guess, the land which is south of Coton Village and mostly west of the M11. And some visitor facilities were provided in that location, including car parking, surfaced footpaths, permissive paths, bins, that kind of, informal visitor infrastructure. So that's our kind of initial phase of the project. But like I say, our ambition over the long term would be that nearly all of these land holdings would become part of that sort of larger reserve. So if I refer you to the triangle of land at the very top of the plan there, that field is a field that we recently converted out of sort of commercial agricultural use and turning into woodland.
Sorry to interrupt, Mr. Wood. When you say land to the south of Coton, on the plan, sort of immediately to the south of the houses, there's a sort of a long linear piece of land, and then there's a sort of a not quite rectangular bit with the junk out of the corner. Is that land part of the Countryside Reserve?
It is, yes.
As well. Right. Okay. Thank you.
But from what you say, Mr. Littlewood, is it your intention that the entirety of the landholding would become part of the reserve,
That's the trustee's ambition, yes.
with public access.
Yes.
Sorry, and does that then include the land to the south of where the triangle is, which would include the route of the...
Yes.
Which is currently... And again, as soon as we talk about that, just so I'm clear, so that area between Madingley Road and Coton, that sort of irregular shaped piece of land, that's currently all let for farming, is
It
it?
is, yes, currently.
Thank you.
Thank you. And then, so in terms of those land holdings, very briefly, can you just explain how the scheme would interact with the CPPF land holding, both directly and indirectly?
Well, directly, obviously, it would go straight through those two parcels of land. You put in a 3-lane road right through the centre of it, which would obviously, be detrimental to the purposes in which it's held, our charitable purposes for holding that land or to protect it from development. So, those purposes will be overturned by the scheme. There is obviously a massive visual and disturbance impact in terms of having buses and a road going through those fields. It affects us in the current state from a farming perspective, in that our farmers indicated that certainly the fields that would be south of the busway would be no longer viable for agriculture, and it's questionable. Certainly the left-hand field, the top left of that, would be non-viable as well, and it's questionable whether the top right would be viable as well. So that's an immediate sort of impact on it, but longer term, obviously, if we're wanting to use that land as a nature reserve, then having a 3-lane road for a nature reserve is really not what we would want.
Thank you. Now, I want to then turn to the history, and I'm not going to ask you to deliver a blow-by-blow account of the history. There may be more questions from that on Mr. Cameron, but what's your position as to the applicant's appraisal of the options for a scheme which was either part of or adjacent to the A1303? Having heard all the evidence that we've heard, what would be your appraisal of that options process?
Well, I think that's set out in my proof of evidence, which you just have to bear with me. I seem to have closed that down by accident. Is that they as set out, as the applicant set out, they appraised two schemes. One of them was a tidal flow scheme, and the other was an inbound bus lane with an active travel route. And I think, as we've heard from Mr. Lee in his evidence, and also Mr. Baker in his evidence, that the specification that was drawn up for that scheme was quite wide, and therefore that would have had impacts on the verges of the SSI and the registered park and garden, as well as some other impacts. So our view was that it would be possible to redesign that scheme on an environmental first basis to attempt to overcome some of the constraints that were identified by such a wide scheme. And Mr. Johnston and Mr. Lee have provided evidence of and our Civitrix drawings provide evidence of our attempts to demonstrate that. So we really have been sort of asking for that since that 2018 process took place. We've been asking the GCP to do that work, to carry out the work on a sort of the scheme that we wanted to see, and they haven't done that, despite requesting that. We even had a petition with 24,000 names on it asking them to do that, and so we've really had no choice, in order to take part in this inquiry, to commission that work ourselves.
Then at paragraph 3.8 of your proof of evidence, you make reference to Natural England's consultation response, and I think Mr. Henderson referred Mr. Woodfield to that document yesterday. And you also refer at paragraph 3.13 to Historic England's consultation responses to that 2018 consultation. What do you say the inspector should draw from those consultation responses, given the schemes that were before Natural England and up for consultation at that point in time, and what you say should have been consulted on?
Well, yeah, I mean, at that point in time, they were responding to a sort of options appraisal assessment with a variety of schemes which weren't provided in any level of detail to them. And understandably, given that both of those organisations have sort of taken an internal decision, as it were, to focus purely on the sort of, in Historic England's case, they don't comment on anything that's less than a Grade 2 star. And in Natural England's case, they don't provide comment usually on anything that's not, below the designation of SSSI. So, understandably, they would be responding that, there are assets, those assets are in proximity to those schemes, and they would naturally want to say, we're concerned about those, but there's not enough detail in them for them to come to a conclusion, and neither were they specifically looking at the impacts of some of the other schemes because they were on non-designated assets. And I think to some extent that's what they've tried to sort of set out in their responses, that this is a corridor in which there is some sensitivity. There's sensitivity from a heritage perspective. You've got historic villages in Coton and Madingley, you've got the American Cemetery, you've got Coton Orchard, and from a nature conservation perspective, you've got Madingley with SSSI, you've got Coton Orchard and some other wildlife sites. So, any infrastructure in that corridor is going to have an impact, and I think that's kind of what they were saying. And they were saying, we're concerned that there are these important assets, as indeed, we are an environmental and heritage charity, and we were also concerned about the impact on those assets as well.
Thank you. I then want to turn to planning policy, which you deal with at section 5 of your proof of evidence, and you refer there to the extant policy for Bourne Airfield. This is 5.2, policy SS7, and we know the applicant's position about the compliance of their scheme with these local planning policies. Can you just give your view, please, as to whether the CPPF alternative would or would not comply with the relevant planning policies to which the applicant has referred in relation to their scheme?
Yes, absolutely it would. It makes clear that, a scheme is required on or parallel. And, it doesn't have to, the only section of the policy which refers to a segregated route is the section through Bourne Airfield. So the section that we're talking about for the CPPF alternative, the policy option is for there to be a scheme either segregated from or as part of the on or parallel to the A1303. So yes, it does.
We obviously have the emerging plan. We've heard a little bit more about that, and we'll find out some more about that when the new Reg 18 version is published. But so far as what we know currently about the emerging local plan, would the CPPF alternative deliver by reference to what we know about the emerging local plan?
Yes, there would be no reason for that not to.
Thank you. I want to just ask you one question about agricultural land. If you can take up your note, please, that was submitted to the inquiry yesterday.
Yeah. Yeah.
Thank you. And then if you turn to page 3 of the PDF, please, and we see there's a table there.
Yep.
Before I ask you something, some detailed questions about it, can you just explain to the inspectors what this table is, what it represents, and what you have done?
Yeah, so Mr. Sensical, I hope that's how you pronounce his name, has produced a table in which he's attempted to sort of summarise the planning balance by setting out what he thinks the relevant things are, and essentially giving them a score or significance. So I have attempted to provide our position on the points that he's raised, where possible, using the scoring system that he's used, although he doesn't set out what that scoring system is, so we're a bit unclear about.
We may have that clarified, but in terms of your understanding, he uses the words in his table substantial, significant and limited.
Yeah.
So just explain what approach you have taken by reference to those words.
So I've assumed that substantial is the worst.
Or when you say the worst,
there's a high scoring in
Yeah.
either direction.
Yeah.
Significant is the sort of middle score, and limited is the low score.
Well, there we go. If you've got that wrong, he can explain that. But that's how you've approached it.
Exactly.
So we're on agricultural land. If you can scroll through the table to page 10, we see a final entry in the box, loss of agricultural land. And on the left-hand side, we see Mr. Sensicle's summary. He says the loss of 39 hectares of best and most versatile agricultural land exceeds the threshold for a major adverse effect, albeit mitigated somewhat by the land's relatively lower strategic value. Can you just provide your comment on what he says there?
Yeah, yes. I mean, it's unclear what the strategic value is referred to here. It's clearly best and most versatile land. 39 hectares of it will be removed as part of the scheme.
And he says limited weight. What do you say about?
I would say that would have to be significant.
Now, moving on then to Greenbelt, you deal with Greenbelt in your proof of evidence in section 6, and you refer to the Greenbelt assessment, which is CD 118. There's no dispute on the part of the applicant that this is inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. And at paragraph 6.4, you deal with the question of openness, and you summarise the applicant's position in respect of openness, and then set out your position in respect of openness at paragraph 6.5. Can you just briefly summarise to the inspectors your position in respect of the effect of the scheme on openness, please?
Yeah, I think our view is that whilst the scheme might be seen in context of some of the existing roads in the area, most of those are the scheme for the majority runs through open countryside, well away from those roads, and because the roads have been there a long time, they're very well screened. So, with the exception of the sort of area to the east of the M11, the remainder of it we don't believe is particularly strongly affected by the roads. Also, the scheme will remove sections of hedgerows, so particularly on the sort of section around Coton Village, the landscape and greenbelt assessment refers to the fact there's lots of hedgerows. It's quite a closed landscape. Well, obviously, if you're taking those hedges, sections of those hedges out, then you're making the scheme much more visible. You're having an impact on it. But I guess one of the biggest impacts will be buses travelling at 50 miles an hour, and we're talking about, if my understanding is, 9 buses each way per hour. That's 1 every 3 minutes or something like that through the countryside. And it will also introduce urban style structures and features into the countryside. So there'll be a bus stop at Coton, for example. There'll be lighting, another signage infrastructure, traffic lights where the busway crosses existing roads.
Thank you. Then section 7 of your proof of evidence, page 17, you deal with heritage matters, and you deal with the potential effects of the CPPF alternative on the heritage significance, in particular of the 2 assets at the American Cemetery. This is 7.5. Can you just briefly summarise for the inspectors your position as to the effect of the CPPF alternative on those assets?
Yeah, I think first we need to consider the American cemetery buildings, which are Grade 2 star listed. So they're over 40 metres away from the highway, screened by a hedge, trees and car park and behind a high wall. Obviously there's already the A1303 outside of the cemetery. There's also in that location an access road for visitor vehicles to get into the cemetery as an attraction. So it's my view that the CPBF scheme would not have any impact on the monument and buildings and their setting, and in fact that's not raised by Historic England in their 2018 assessment. They've only referred to impacts on the registered park and garden. So I think let's turn to that. So the second impact is on the registered park and garden, which covers both the cemetery and extends beyond it, southwards up to the hedge next to the A1303, and that particular hedge has taken up quite a lot of the time of the inquiry so far. So I think it's important to understand, and Historic England make this very clear in their response to the initial consultation, in their description of the importance of the registered park and garden, that it's designed to be experienced from the inside, and the setting is most important facing north towards the long views. I'm sure the inspectors will visit and have a look and understand that. It's not designed to be experienced facing south towards Madingley Road. Indeed, there's a large wall there preventing you from looking out of the site and mature trees behind that. So it's been specifically designed to turn its back on the A1303. So the area of the park and garden that's outside the cemetery is dominated by an access road, a car park, a footpath and signage, and therefore it's not the important part of the heritage assets. If I put it to you this way, if you were assessing the outside area solely, it would not qualify as a registered park and garden. If it were to do so, there'd be car parks up and down the country that would be qualifying for that status. So, it's a secondary importance in terms of the registered park and garden.
In terms of the hedge, is your understanding as a CPPF alternative, would the CPPF alternative impinge on the yew hedge that we've spent so much time talking about?
No, I'm referring to the evidence of Mr. Johnston and Mr. Lee, who say that it won't.
Now, there was a specific question raised about the two, I call them granite headstones, that's probably not the right word to use, but the two granite stones which sit in the verge between the hedge and the road. Can you give your understanding to the inspectors of the origin of those stones, their heritage significance, and then lastly, whether there would be an effect on those stones?
I'm afraid I can't give you the history of the stones and what exactly when they were put there, but they are placed on the highway verge, so they're not in the registered park and garden, and therefore I don't think can't be considered as part of the registered park and garden. They are essentially signs to indicate to visitors that they need to turn into the entrance to the thing, so they are essentially very nice road signs. We run a visitor attraction, we have the sort of brown signs outside of ours, they've got some stone signs. And also they're experienced by passing vehicles. So vehicles at that point are travelling at 30 or 40 miles an hour. They're not designed for people to be sort of enjoying them or particularly experiencing them when they are appreciating the cemetery. Indeed, if you're approaching from the west, you come around a curve, the stone would be, I'd be amazed if you even noticed there was a stone there. Certainly I've been up and down that road how many times and hadn't noticed there was one on one side of the road. So I think what we can say is that these are not important in a heritage perspective for the scheme. I would add that Mr. Johnston and Mr. Lee have indicated that there could still be room potentially on the verge through our scheme to relocate them to that location if that was necessary. But if that was not the case, then they would probably have to be maybe lost or relocated onto the sort of green island that's outside the front of the cemetery. But obviously, more appropriate visitor attraction signs could be installed on the highway, and probably further from the cemetery would be better to give drivers more notice.
Mr. Littlewood, just before you do move on,
Yeah.
you do say in your proof that there would be harm to the setting of the cemetery. I think it's at paragraph 7.5 You say it would be low harm, but nonetheless you say harm. Can you just explain what harm you consider there would be?
Well, if we're having to take some of the verge out, a small amount of verge out of the front, then I can't sit here and say that that would cause zero harm. And so really, I'm just indicating that there would be a small change outside the entrance. But what I'm saying is that is an area of low heritage significance anyway, and therefore the harm would be very low. But I didn't want to be able to sit here and say there would be no change or zero harm. So very low harm outside the front.
So moving on then from heritage to landscape. Now we heard from Mr. Carolyn. Well, I wasn't here, but you I understand have taken in Mr. Carolyn's evidence. And one of the issues, as I understand it, that was raised by the inspectors related to the size of the landscape receptor that was used as the basis for the LVIA. And Mr. Carolyn was asked questions about using the landscape character areas as the basis for the assessment, and he expressed his professional judgment that that was an appropriate landscape receptor to use as the basis for the analysis. Now, look, we've said at the beginning you're not a landscape expert, but what comment do you have on that approach by reference to the questions that Mr. Carolyn was asked by the inspectors?
Well, it was interesting to hear the inspector say that, because actually that was the conclusion, the point we were wanting to make anyway, which is that the two landscape character areas chosen are very large. I think they're 37 and 68 square kilometres respectively. So that results in a very large area in which you're assessing impact, and therefore you end up with a low degree of harm. And obviously Mr. Corrin stated that was his professional judgment, that was an appropriate approach to take. However, it's my judgment that it would be sensible to consider the impact of this scheme within the smaller local landscape areas. Obviously, inevitably, this results in a smaller area and therefore a significantly larger impact, and that's really where the difference of opinion between myself and Mr. Corrin lies. That's that I indicated that there's a high impact, and particularly when you're looking at that corridor of land that's between Coton Village and the A1303, which is bounded by the hill and the A1303 at the top, Coton Village at the south, the M11 to the east. It's a very narrow corridor of land, and I think to our minds, that it makes sense to consider the impact of the scheme in that landscape, which was perceived in that way as that landscape. My proof clearly states that I consider the C2 scheme within the local character areas of 1, land west and north of Coton, so Madingley Hill, 2, Coton Orchard east of the M11, and briefly east of the M11. So I don't measure the effect of the scheme against the entire LCA3 or LCA4 character areas, as Mr. Corrin has done, and that's how I arrive at a different conclusion.
Thank you. Next topic then, the maintenance and active travel track that's proposed as part of the scheme. I want to look at that first, and then I want to come and ask some questions about the route that you're suggesting could be implemented as an alternative to Cambourne, by way of an alternative. But just starting with the access and maintenance track proposed as part of the scheme, to summarise Mr. Lonergan's evidence, there are essentially 3 purposes of that track: maintenance, emergency access, and it would be used by pedestrians and cyclists. So I just want to ask you about each of those topics. Firstly, in terms of maintenance, we've obviously heard Mr. Lonergan's evidence that it's necessary for the busway to be properly maintained without impacts on services, without disrupting services. Can you just give your comment on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, I think our view could I firstly just sort of say why this is of concern to Cambridge past, present and future. I think firstly because it involves a compulsory purchase of the charity's land in order to build that maintenance and access track, as well as other landowners, and I've calculated that that's around 7,200 metres square of land that would be compulsory purchase purely for this maintenance and access track. And secondly, because it's essentially an additional lane of road, the impact of that scheme adds 30% impact to the scheme. So if you're going through Coton Orchard, the impact is 30% greater because you're building, an extra lane of traffic. So you're essentially building a 3-lane highway instead of a 2-lane highway. So the question is really, what's the public benefit of that, to justify that harm and the compulsory purchase? And our view is that it's really not, that it doesn't pass either of those two tests. And the reason for that is that the busway is being constructed as a regular road for use by sensory guided vehicles. So in the case of a physically guided bus system, such as the guided bus which already exists in Cambridge, it's physically guided and therefore no other vehicles can use it. And so if you need to carry out maintenance or you need to carry out emergency access, you need a way to be able to get those vehicles along the track because they can't use the track itself. Whereas in this case, it's just a road. Any vehicle can be able to drive along it. And so there's no reason to have it's essentially the same as another road. And so you don't have maintenance emergency tracks along all the highways across the UK in order that maintenance can be carried out and emergency vehicle access can be carried out. Neither do you find, as you're driving around the roads, maintenance people everywhere holding up the traffic. So not only that, is that it's only going to be used by buses. So we're only talking, a small number of buses using the road. So even, let's say you had some guys in the road doing some maintenance to the vegetation and they needed to close one of the bus lanes, then the bus comes along. If there's no other buses coming in the other direction, it just overtakes them and goes past them. And even if there was another bus coming in the other direction, they would only have to wait a matter of seconds for that bus to pass before they could pull out. So the delay to the journey must be less than a minute, if even less than that potentially, which has no meaningful effect on either journey times or the passenger's experience of the sort of quality of service that they're providing.
Thank you. Then, in terms of emergency access, that was another reason given by Mr. Lonergan as to why the track was essential to the operation of the scheme. What's your view on that?
Well, obviously they can use the bus road to reach the accident, and as there's almost no other traffic using the road, that would be much easier for them than reaching an accident on a normal highway road where you might get tailbacks. So and also the maintenance track may well have pedestrians and cyclists on it. So if you were driving an ambulance or whatever, or a fire engine, you're trying to get to emergency quickly, you're not going to drive down, a track that's got cyclists and dog walkers and all the rest of it. You drive down the busway because that's going to be the quickest and safest way for you to reach the accident. And also, the emergency vehicles then may want to get onto the busway in order to deal with whatever they've got to deal with. And in order to do that, as we've heard, they'd have to get across the verge between the maintenance access track and the road. Now, we've heard that will have swales in it, so ditches, and Mr. Lonergan said, well, they'd be quite shallow ditches and it wouldn't be a problem. I'm not sure how the ambulance drivers might feel about taking someone on seriously injured across that. But if we refer to the design and access statement, which is CD 117, page 34, figure...
Just pause there so that it'll take a bit of time for the inspectors to...
Yeah, so,
can you just give that reference again,
yeah,
please?
Sure. It's CD 1,
yeah.
17, page 34.
Yeah, just pause for a minute, CD
Yeah.
1. Are you there, sirs? Have you...
It's just open.
Okay.
Sorry, I think it is a big document. And it's not open it.
Page 34.
That's correct, yeah. And then figure 9.9.
Sorry, did you just say figure 9.9? I can only see a figure 9.8 on page 34. 35.
Oh, that's possibly what I'm working on. What you should be looking at is a cross-section of the route as it goes through Coton
Yes,
Orchard.
so yeah, page 35, figure 9.9.
Yes.
Yeah. And you can see there that there are trees planted in the verge between the access track and the busway. So if you're on an emergency vehicle, you've then got to, I don't know, chop down the trees, get through the trees. So it's really, I can't see why any emergency vehicle driver would not choose to drive down a road which has got almost no vehicles on it in order to reach, and is wide and would enable them to travel at speed to reach the emergency, rather than a maintenance access track where they've got to dodge lots of people and potentially drive through trees and ditches to get to the accident.
And then in terms of its use as an active travel route, do you have any, we'll come on to the CPPF proposal, but do you have any comments on the applicant's proposal for the track to be used by pedestrians and cyclists?
Well, yeah, I mean, it goes up the biggest hill in Cambridge area. I mean, it's a significant barrier for a lot of cyclists. I can say this with confidence because I currently work at Wandleby Country Park, which is on the other big hill in Cambridge, and I know from our experience there that people say to us that they don't cycle because they can't get up, that they don't want to get up the hill or it's too difficult for them. So, that is one of the, flaws in that particular proposal.
Thank you. Then let's look at what CPPF is proposing by way of an alternative. If you can take up, I think the best place to look is Mr. Lee's proof of evidence. If you can take that up, please.
Sorry, Jack, you're going to have to give me a reference to that.
Yeah, so it's CD 26.
Yeah.
And then within CD 26, it's 2610.
Yeah.
And it's Mr. Lee's proof of evidence, the document, but I want to look at Appendix A to that document, which is in that same PDF. And it's page 70 of the PDF, or page 38 of 61 of the report at Appendix A.
Yeah.
Sorry, could you just give the core document reference again?
CD 2610.
Oh, I've got it, yeah. W3.
W31, yeah.
Thank you.
So we should all be looking at figure 10, which is a full page plan. We can see in the little white box that the Cambourne Greenway is marked in green, and then there's a dotted green line labelled potential extensions to the Greenway West. Can you just explain by reference to this plan what the dotted green line is and what your proposals are?
Yes, that's a public bridle way, so it's already accessible to the public to cycle, and it goes to Highfields Caldecott.
So just let's pause, because I think we need to be absolutely clear on this. We can see the solid green line, if you sort of zoom in, ends in Hardwick.
Yeah.
And then there's a dotted green line going out to the west.
Yeah.
And I don't think Highfields Caldecott is actually labelled on the plan. Where when you say it goes to Highfields Caldecott, where is Highfields Caldecott on that plan?
So Highfields Caldecott is the village before Bourne, adjacent to what will be the Bourne Airfield development.
So if you zoom, I think there's the label Bourne Airfield, and you've got the D of Airfield.
Yeah.
And if you zoom in on the plan, there's a settlement, a grey settlement there.
Yeah.
What is that settlement?
That's Highfields Caldecott.
Okay. So the current public bridleway does it go as far as the north-south road running through Highfields Caldecott?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So, sorry, pausing there, that's existing public bridleway you were saying?
Yeah.
Okay, and then if in terms of through Highfields Caldecott, we can see there's those two alternative routes or complementary routes marked to the west. Is that on existing bridleway, or would that be new public rights of access?
I'm just going to have to zoom in, Jack, on that. So that will be new access into the Bourne airfield development, which I understand through Mr. Lee's evidence is that there will be access from Bourne airfield into Highfields Caldecott, and therefore the cycle route can go through there, and there would be agreement with the developers of Bourne airfield to provide cycle provision across the airfield and to Cambourne, basically. So what we're saying is that it's already possible to cycle from Cambridge to Highfields Caldecott using the public right-of-way network to get to Highfields Caldecott. In fact, I've done it.
Okay, so just pausing there.
Yeah.
In terms of, it's a public right-of-way, so legally you have the right to cycle your bike to Highfields Caldecott already. In terms of its suitability as a cycleway, what's your comment on that?
Well, it's not currently suitable for use for commuter cycling, but what you would need to do is you need to put a hard surface, all-weather surface down on the bridleway, and you could add solar studs as the GCP does on lots of other schemes. So that would make it comparable with the applicant's scheme in terms of its usability to cyclists.
And just pausing there, would any additional land be required to deliver that type of scheme as you're talking about?
No.
And then to the west of Highfields Caldecott, you've described that would be a route that would be delivered as part of the Bourne airfield development.
Yeah.
So as far as you're aware, has there been any consideration of this proposal, that's to say a cycleway to Cambourne along the route that passes through the Bourne airfield development? Has that been considered by the applicant as an alternative to delivery of the active travel route?
I'm not aware that they've ever, in any of the consultations or any of the events, proposed that as an option.
And what do you say is the relevance of this alternative that you have proposed to the acceptability of the applicant scheme?
Well, as I've said, the applicant scheme requires the compulsory purchase of our land and additional harms in order to deliver this scheme. We're saying that actually you can, by delivering this particular cycle route, which the applicant themselves has already identified through their own local walking and transport plan, without the need for compulsory purchase and without the additional harms of going through Coton Orchard. So that would be one way that the applicant could very quickly and easily mitigate the impacts of their scheme and the requirements for compulsory purchase.
Thank you. Now, I'm conscious we've got to 45 minutes. I've got about maximum 5 more minutes. I don't know whether should we take a break now and come back to finish the 5 minutes, or should we stop that?
I think I'd be okay to do another 5 minutes.
Okay. And then we'll have a break. So I want to move on then to a specific point that was made by Mr. Baker about route alignment through Coton Orchard. If I can refer you, please, to the applicant's statement of case. I think this references a number of places, but let's look there, which is CD 2301. Don't necessarily, well, I can summarise what's said, Mr. Littlewood, but for the inspector's reference, CD 23.1, and it's paragraph 14, 23, 29.
14, 23.
29. As I say, I can, nothing turns particularly on the text, so I can just propose to put the point to Mr. Littlewood. It It said here, and Mr. Baker expanded on this a little bit in his evidence, that an alternative route through Coton Orchard was proposed by the GCP in October 2022, but rejected by CPPF at that time. And it said that this more northern alignment utilised a gap in the line of original Bramleys and thus avoided impacts on these older trees. And the implication was Mr. Baker was that the applicant had explored alternatives through Coton Orchard, and the reason why they hadn't chosen this less harmful route was because CPPF had objected to it. Can you just give your comment, please, on that evidence?
Yeah, I think it was misleading. So in the first instance, we'd been advised by our tenant farmer, because we'd asked them what the impact would be of various route options across the field, and I passed that information on to the GCP as part of their sort of fact-finding information. Obviously, you know, I said they were concerned and we were concerned about the farming viability. But, you know, we obviously weren't happy with either of the routes, but one of the things that we suggested as a way of sort of mitigating the impacts and that were proposed was to put a curve in the road. And the reason for that is that the curve could go further south, so we didn't lose the farmland from going further north.
Mr. Littlewood, at this point, is it worth going to the image you've got in your
Yeah, I think it probably is,
page
actually.
24.
Yeah.
But to help, I think if you could just explain that. I find it a bit difficult to differentiate between the different shades of green you've got there. Just explain what each of the routes means.
Yeah. So this diagram is obviously produced by the applicant. So the top route, as it were, is the route that they were consulting with us on. They were saying, we're looking at options across your land to go through Coton Orchard. If we took this northern route, we could potentially put it through the middle of the orchard and maybe avoid some of the impacts on the orchard. And the route below that one that they've produced was the route that they previously were looking at. And they came to talk to us about those two options. And so what we said was, look, our farmers said the further north you go on this, you know, the more difficult the viability comes from agriculture. But we'd also said that, look, you could put a curve in here, and if you put a curve in, which I've tried to indicate, I'm sorry, it's not very professional in a blue felt tip pen, which might be green on in my PDF it's showing as sort of blue, you know, as sort of indicative of going further south across our land so that we didn't lose the viability to the north, and also then enabling you to reach the point at which you'd cross the road to go into that sort of section of Coton Orchard where there's fewer trees. But also it has other further benefits in that putting a bend in at this location means that when you're experiencing the busway, when you're on Cambridge Road, at the minute the proposal is for a very long straight feature, which will mean you'll get a very long view of a very large piece of transport infrastructure. And if you put a curve in, obviously you can only see as far as the first bend in that curve, and so you get a much more limited visual impact from the scheme. Now obviously I think they were concerned about bus speeds, but obviously there's a road here and there would also be a bus stop, and so you would be wanting vehicles to slow down at this point anyway, and so we couldn't see that putting a curve in this location would be problematic for that point of view. But for whatever reason they said, no, you know, we can't put a curve in, we don't want to put a curve in, whatever it was. And so we were left with the two options that they'd proposed, neither of which we supported, really.
Your reason for the curve is that it retains as much land as possible to the north.
Exactly, and that's what the farmer had told us, is that the viability was to the north. You know,
so it's not to do with the configuration of the road; it's the fact that it retains land.
It retains land. It's also got another benefit because there's a hill on that road there, so you can see that the northern route of those has got a bigger cutting on it, and the reason for that is because you start to cut into the hillside, and so there's also a desire to keep the bus lane further south so that it doesn't cut into the hill and be less visible. And again, if you took the route south on a curve, you could start to, you're not going to have such a big cutting on that. So that's what we did. I mean, I think the applicant in their statement of case is saying the reason that they haven't considered as a curve is around safety issues. But if you refer to their plans in relation to the section between Hardwick and Long Road, there is a curve in the road next to a road junction.
Thank you. Then replacement open space. You deal with open space at paragraph 8.5, 6 and 7 of your proof of evidence. Can you just briefly summarise your position on public open space?
Yeah, I think the main point I'd like to make to the inspectors here is obviously we're making the point that the maintenance and access track is not justified, and the compulsory purchase for it is not justified. And if you were to decide that actually that was the case and it shouldn't be included as part of the scheme, you would have a problem on your hands, because the proposed public open space replacement can only be reached via the maintenance and access track. And so we wanted to be able to reassure you that were that the case, Cambridge past, present and future will be willing to use our land, which is only 300 metres away from the proposed lost space, as that alternative. And that also has some advantages as an open space. It wouldn't be impacted during the construction phase, for example, so it would be easily available. It's part of our kind of Coton land holdings as a reserve. There's a public footpath and cycle path that runs next to it. So, you know, there is a number of benefits which I set out in my proof of evidence as to the suitability of that land as a piece of public open space.
Thank you. Then final question. You have a conclusion at section 9, and I also just want to refer you, please, to your additional note where, having considered the weightings to be given to the harms and benefits by Mr. Sensical, you reach a conclusion at paragraph 7 by reference to your original proof of evidence. So taking into account all those matters, can you please just summarise your position, having heard the evidence that you've heard so far in the inquiry, as to where you say the balance of benefits and harms lies in this scheme?
Yes, in our view, the planning balance does not justify the scheme. And I think our position has always been throughout that the Cambridge PPF alternative is a much better policy fit.
Thank you, Mr. Littlewood. Those are all the questions I had in chief.
Mr. Littlewood, just before we do take the break, can I just check one factual point, very briefly? Page 18 of your proof, in paragraph 712.
Yeah.
Are you there?
Yep.
If you go up 3 lines from the end, and you've got reference to a city lying only 2 miles west, should that be east?
Sorry, I'm not quite the range. So paragraph 7.
12.
12.
But it's on page 18. It goes over the page.
Oh, okay, sorry.
It's the penultimate sentence.
Yes, you're correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, we'll take a break now, and we'll return at 5 to 11. So the inquiry is now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
it's time for the time for the inquiry to resume. Just looking at sort of building in break times, assuming we're going in sort of 45-minute sessions, it looks like we'll have a break at about 20 to 1, which is when I suggest we have a lunch break or thereabouts. So just to confirm, so Mr. Cameron, I'll ask you to ask any questions in cross-examination.
So 20 to 1, you'll have to remind me, so that's not 45 minutes. But
We're 11 o'clock now, so I don't...
Oh, sorry, that's including a break.
2, okay.
I'm thinking 45 minutes, then a break,
Yeah.
another 45 minutes, then lunch.
You're just thinking ahead.
ask you questions on, and we're going to start with matters of principle, and then we'll come on to policy, the CPPF alternative, landscape, maintenance track, route alignment, veteran trees, exchange land, planning balance. So I'm afraid I've got rather a long list because you cover quite a lot of areas. So on matters of principle, can we just start with your proof of evidence 6.3. Which is on page 13 in the paper copy. So the first point is it right that we are agreed that there is a compelling need to improve public transport between the Cambourne area and Cambridge? That's a matter of agreement between us, isn't it?
Yes, there is a need for public transport.
Well, it's a compelling need. I'm using your words. Good. And there's a specific need, and this is in the CPPF statement of case. We've already looked at it. A specific need to deliver a reliable public transport service. That's agreed also, isn't it?
Yes.
And if we look at your proof at 5.9, it's also agreed that there is a policy requirement for a scheme to improve public transport between Cambourne and Cambridge. Another agreed matter.
Yes.
So it's not just there's a compelling need, but there's a policy requirement for a scheme to meet that need. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And just if we look at the extent of that requirement, can we just take up your supplemental proof, and if we go to paragraph 5.
Oh, is this the thing that we did yesterday?
Yes. So we've got compelling need, policy requirement for a scheme to improve public transport, and if we go to paragraph 5, and we see, referring to Mr. Sensical, he appears to be referring to the applicant's scheme when the policy requirement is in fact for a scheme, and then it says CPPF, CPC and the applicant are in agreement that a scheme or schemes are required. Now these are the purposes for which they're required: to improve public transport and active travel. So again, we're in agreement on that. The scheme, the purpose of the scheme which is required is to improve both public transport and active travel. Is that right?
Correct.
And the reason, in broad brush view, that there is a need for a scheme to provide a public transport service between Cambourne and Cambridge is to allow people to live in Cambourne and travel into Cambridge, or vice versa, people to travel from Cambridge to employment and for other reasons in Cambourne. That's why it's needed, isn't it?
That's correct.
And a scheme which meets that need, for which there is a need, there's a policy requirement, therefore would deliver a substantial transport benefit. Agreed?
Well, I guess that depends on what your definition of substantial is compared to, the current scheme at the minute. There's already a bus service, as an example, from Cambourne to Cambridge, which on most days when there's not any traffic congestion gets you to Cambridge pretty quickly.
Yep, but we're agreed between us, compelling need, policy requirement for a scheme, the scheme must cover public transport and active travel. So if you provide such a scheme and you meet the policy requirement, can we agree this? You therefore deliver a transport benefit. We must agree that,
You
mustn't
deliver
we?
a transport benefit, absolutely. And I should also say that I say a scheme or schemes. So you could meet the benefits through one scheme, or you could meet it through multiple schemes.
Yes.
So,
But if you do come up with a scheme which is one scheme that goes from Cambourne to Cambridge, you deliver a transport benefit.
yes,
Must do.
yes.
And do you accept that, I know there's an argument about the cost in terms of environmental cost, economic cost and so on of doing so, but the applicant's scheme will meet that need, won't it? It is a public transport scheme from Cambourne to
Yes,
Cambridge.
it will.
But the CPPF case is that the agreed need should be met by an alternative scheme, and that's why you've put forward your alternative.
That's correct.
So you don't seek to challenge the development strategy set out in the adopted local plan, do you?
No.
Now let's turn to scheme objectives and aims, and I've asked Mr. Lee about this, so I'm not going to go into great detail. The objective and aims for the scheme are objectives and aims which your organisation shares, doesn't it?
You'll have to remind me of what they are. I'm saying,
Yes.
Mr. Cameron.
Well, let's go to CD 104 then, please. And if you go to page 3, 4.1 in that document, once you've got it.
Yeah.
So,
Whereabouts in the document, Mr. Cameron?
page 3, sir, paragraph 4.1 are objectives, and then aims come below. But if we look at scheme objectives, achieve improved accessibility to support the economic growth of the Greater Cambridge region. Do you agree with that objective?
Yeah.
And to deliver a sustainable transport network or system that connects areas between Cambourne and Cambridge along the A428, A1303 transport corridor. You agree with that?
Yeah.
And contribute to enhanced quality of life by relieving congestion and improving air quality within the surrounding areas along the A428, A1303 corridor and within Cambridge City.
Yes.
Laudable objective.
Yes.
And the aims, not going to read them all out, but to relieve congestion in particular on the A1303 Madingley Road. Aim you share?
Sorry,
Do you share that aim?
the relief congestion.
Yes.
Yes.
And to support economic growth? Are you in favour of that?
We recognise the need for economic growth.
So, do you share that aim?
Well, I have to be careful what I say here, Mr. Cameron,
Yes.
because I'm speaking on behalf of Cambridge Past, Present and Future, which has a set of charitable objects. And so I can only say that I support things that are in line with our charitable objects. So you'll understand that it can be difficult for me to say I support
Yes.
certain things that may not be aligned with those. So in this instance, we understand the need for economic growth.
Right.
I can't necessarily say that I support that as part of my charity's charitable objects.
But you appreciate and understand that it's government policy
Yes,
to
I do.
support economic growth in Cambridge,
Yes.
and do you seek to argue against that policy?
We sometimes do find ourselves arguing against that on the scale of growth, and I think you heard from some of the other witnesses, for example, about water scarcity and the ability of Cambridge to absorb that level of growth without the impact on the natural environment.
But you're not here to challenge government policy, are you?
Not today, no.
Thank you. And deliver a sustainable transport system, we know that's agreed,
Yeah.
and to enhance quality of life, and it's relieving congestion and improving air quality. That's a shared aim as well, isn't it?
Yes.
So, objectives and aims shared. Now, can I ask you this? Unless the order scheme is approved, the order is made, or an alternative scheme is delivered, the desirable objectives will not be delivered, will they?
That's not to say that some of them could not be delivered in other ways. We've talked about the cycle route, for example, could be delivered.
But the public transport element,
The public transport element, well, obviously we're arguing that the Cambridge
Yes.
PPF alternative could deliver that,
Yeah.
that benefit. If you were saying that no scheme, so neither our scheme nor the applicant's scheme,
I'm saying if the order is not made, or an alternative scheme is delivered, so it's either the order or an alternative scheme, if you have neither, you don't deliver the objectives, do you?
no, although I think Mr. Lee was making the point in his evidence that there are other methods that could do that. But short of the fact, something has to happen. I think.
Thank you.
I agree.
So something has to happen, and given that we're agreed that the scheme would deliver those objectives, we know one means of achieving the objectives, and if one's going to turn away that scheme on the basis that there was an alternative, such an alternative would have to be realistic and deliverable, wouldn't it?
Yes.
Thank you. And even if there were a realistic and deliverable alternative scheme, in deciding whether to reject this scheme because there is no realistic and deliverable alternative, do you agree that it would be right to take delay as one of the factors into the balance?
I'm not sure that it would. Part of the reason for that is the speed of the development of build-out at Bourne, which will take 15 years to complete. And so there's not an assumption that 3,500 houses will be built immediately at Bourne. And Mr. Lee's evidence indicated that, in fact, due to COVID changed travel patterns, that actually the world has changed. There's also the A428, that actually you could release more houses for development if the planning condition was changed to do that. You can also improve bus services by adding more buses on them, for example, or reducing fares to encourage more people to use them. So there are interim measures that you can take to improve public transport as Bourne Airfield is developed over time.
But the very word interim suggests that they're pro tem for the time being in the hope of something else turning up. So delay as a factor, it's a question of how long the delay is, but delay must be a relevant factor, mustn't it, in striking the planning balance. You can't turn down something that achieves the objectives in the hope of something else coming along if you have no idea about when it's going to come along.
Well,
Agreed?
I think I referred to the evidence of Mr. Johnson and Mr. Lee about how long it might take to deliver the alternative
I'm not
scheme.
asking about that. I'm asking as a matter of principle whether you agree that the length of time it would take to come up with an alternative scheme is a relevant factor. That's the only point I'm asking you about.
It would be one factor in a bunch of factors in terms of looking at the planning balance. But it
Thank
wouldn't,
you.
I don't consider it would be a major factor because there are other interim measures which could be put in place.
It's one factor. So, can we now, still on principle, just like to ask you about the principles that apply when considering compulsory purchase. What you say in 3.2 of your evidence, 2/3 of the way down, page 2, CPPF is strongly of the view that its land should not be purchased compulsorily unless there is no alternative. That's your position, isn't it?
Yes, well, obviously in terms of alternatives, as we heard at the inquiry, there are numerous of those, not just the CPPF alternative. East-West Rail is an alternative, the Girton Interchange is an alternative.
But I'm asking you matters of principle.
Yeah.
You're making a statement of principle
Yes,
that a compulsory purchase provision shouldn't be approved unless there is no alternative.
yes.
First of all, we're agreed that any alternative must be realistic and deliverable. So it's not just any old alternative, it has to be a realistic and deliverable alternative, doesn't it?
Yes.
And if there was a realistic and deliverable alternative, do you agree that its mere existence is not sufficient to defeat an application for a compulsory purchase order, because a balanced view must be taken even in the compulsory purchase context?
I think the compulsory purchase context is around the benefit.
Yes, but do you agree that in the compulsory purchase context, and we can go to the authorities if we need to because they're in the core documents, a balanced view still has to be taken even if there's an alternative? You weigh up what are the benefits of the alternative, even if it's realistic and deliverable, how long it would take to deliver it. Those are all relevant factors in the CPO context. Do you agree?
If you say so, yes.
And therefore it's not right to say that land should not be purchased compulsorily. It may be your view, but as a matter of principle, it's not right to say that it shouldn't be purchased compulsorily unless there is no alternative. That's too absolutist a position, isn't it?
I think it's my position.
It's your position.
Sorry, I think it might be something to do with the acoustics in this room, but when people are talking at the back, I can hear it and it's putting me off a bit. So, yeah, I think it's something to do with how it looks there. So can we keep that noise down, please? Thank you. Sorry.
Right. Well, thank you for that's matters of principle. We're now going to turn on to, just before we turn on to the subject topics, I'd like to ask you about your areas of expertise, and you touched on this in your evidence. Now, your evidence is said to be a proof of evidence on planning matters. That's what we see on the front cover.
Yeah.
And if we go to page 2, scope of evidence, page 1, sorry, para 2, scope of evidence, you're covering history of CPPF in relation to land west of Cambridge, summary of position, and then I'm more interested in these parts. Local planning policy.
So I'm not with you in the right place, Mr. Cameron.
Well, I'm in your proof of evidence.
Yeah.
You've got a section 2 on page 1, which has got scope of evidence.
Yeah.
So we've done the first 2. Third bullet point, local planning policy, greenbelt,
Yeah.
heritage,
Yeah.
landscape and visual impact,
Yeah.
mitigation,
Yeah.
open space, and we can add on planning balance, can't we?
Yeah.
And do you have any relevant professional qualifications in planning, landscape or heritage?
Not qualifications, no.
Or membership of professional organisations?
No.
So you're here giving a view based on from experience rather than giving an expert opinion as a professional qualified in those fields. Is that right?
I'm afraid we couldn't afford people to do that.
Well, I'm not making this as a criticism. I'm just trying to establish
Yes,
the basis
that's-
on which
yeah,
you're giving
yes,
evidence.
that's correct, yeah.
So it's a view from experience as distinct from an expert opinion from a qualified professional.
Yes, could I just also maybe have the benefit of the inspectors, the way that our organisation works. So whilst I can only be here representing myself today, we form our view and position on matters such as busway and other planning matters through a planning committee, which is made up of a group of volunteers, including Mr. Lee, who help to inform us, and most of those do have professional qualifications or have had their retired planners, directors of planning, economists, transport professionals. But I'm not speaking for them, I'm making that clear today, I'm speaking for myself, but our position as an organisation is informed by that.
But so are you here giving your own independent view, or are you here as a spokesperson for other people?
I'm giving my independent view, but I'm saying it's informed by those other people who I've spoken to.
But nonetheless, it's a view from experience rather than a qualified, in that sense, professional expert opinion.
That's correct.
Well, let's turn to your view on local planning policy. And we've covered the headline of compliance, but just let's spend a little bit of time, not a great deal of detail, in having a look at the South Cambridgeshire local plan. And we need core document 602 for this. And can we start with the development strategy, which we find on page 40. And there's a policy S6, the development strategy to 2031.
Is that page 40?
That's page 40 in the PDF. All page numbers I give you will be in the PDF, except for in your proof where I've got a paper.
So policy S6, is that where we are?
S6.
Yeah.
Just looking, so this is the development strategy, and I don't know whether you're familiar from your experience that these local plans often set out a strategy, and then they set out policies designed to deliver the strategy. I thought you would be. Yeah. And the strategy here for South Cambridgeshire includes, paragraph 3 new strategic scale allocations proposed for housing-led development with associated employment and supporting services and facilities to meet the majority of the additional development needs. So the South Cambridgeshire, which abuts the city, does it not? In fact, it surrounds
Yes.
it.
Yeah.
They have a strategy rather than, in some areas, you might seek to extend an existing settlement. The strategy here is to respect the green belt and to make strategic allocations beyond the green belt.
That's not correct. No, the strategy is a combined approach. So they release Greenbelt and also do the extended settlement. So Trumpington and Eddington to North West Cambridge are released from the Greenbelt. So it's a combined strategy actually, which Stephen Kelly, when he talks, he will probably talk about, which is around expansion into the green belt. It's around some additional development in villages, and it's also around creating some larger new settlements out with Cambridge.
Which is a point that you make in response to Mr. Sensical, that one of the allocations that he refers to, as you point out, is in the green belt.
Yes, correct.
Yeah. But in terms of the South Cambridgeshire strategy, which is developed, as you say, with the City Council, I'll put it this way, one of the elements of the strategy is to propose strategic allocations which lie beyond the green belt. Is that correct?
That's correct. What this this refers to here in 3 is just the new ones. It doesn't refer to those that were already previously consented, such as Northstowe.
But this is the strategy here, and an element of the strategy, of that part of the strategy, of strategic scale allocations. We've got, you say, Newtown north of Waterbeach, but here a new village based on Bourne Airfield for 3,500 homes, and a major expansion of Cambourne for a 4th link village of, and it turned out there's a planning permission for 2,350 homes, isn't there?
That's correct.
Rather than the,
and the Waterbeach is 11,000,
but
9,000.
So the numbers, well, for Bourne Airfield that is the number, but the other numbers have changed.
Yeah.
But so do you agree that it's an essential part of the strategy to facilitate that development at Bourne Airfield and Cambourne?
Yes, I don't think I'd disagree with that. I think it is important for the inspectors to understand the sort of quantum of development around Cambridge and what's planned both in the local plan and, which Stephen will come with, the emerging local plan, is that we're talking around sort of 44,000 new houses, of which 3,500 would be at Bourne. So yes, it's strategic, but it has to be seen in that context.
Well, there's very significant growth proposed.
Yeah.
It's strategic. I mean, it's strategic enough to find its way into a policy which is headed development strategy, isn't it?
That's fine, yes.
And if we look at the policies themselves, SS7, New Village, Bourne Airfield, and we go to page 86, the Bourne Airfield proposal in the plan, the policy, and it's SS78 we're looking at on page 86, and we're looking at 8A, significant improvements in public transport, including, and we've got at Roman 3, provision of high quality bus priority measures or busway on or parallel to the A1303 between its junction with the A428 and Queen's Road, Cambridge. And so do you agree that it's an essential part of the local plan strategy, Bourne Airfield being an element of that strategy, that a either high quality bus priority measures or a busway be provided on that corridor.
Yes, one thing I would point out, Inspector, this is the 2018 local plan, which actually was first produced, sort of draft version produced in 2014. At that time, and when this was published, there was no discussion around an east-west railway route coming via Cambourne. That's all been subsequent, and I suspect when we see the emerging local plan that will be a change of emphasis.
But this is the currently adopted
It's the currently
local plan,
adopted
isn't it?
local plan, yes.
And the emerging local plan, if we look at how far it's got at the moment, and we're going to go to core document 604, those were the first proposals, and we know that they're going to be, there's a new version coming out soon, no doubt much awaited, but let's just have a look at the first proposals in CD 604. And if we go to page, this is obviously an early stage, go to page 44, the strategy in that version, it's top of the page, first full paragraph, our proposed strategy is heavily informed by the location of the existing and committed public transport schemes.
Sorry, Mr. Cameron, the wrong...
Sorry, page 44 on...
Which paragraph are you? Because there's no paragraphs aren't numbered, are they?
They're not. It's the first full paragraph at the top of the page.
Yeah.
So, shall I start reading again?
Yes, please, thank you.
Our proposed strategy is heavily informed by the location of existing and committed public transport schemes. For example, locating growth at Cambourne takes advantage of the proposed east-west rail station and Cambourne to Cambridge public transport scheme. So when we get to this policy direction, if we can call it that, it was made knowing about East-West Rail, wasn't it?
Yes, it was, yeah.
And knowing about East-West Rail, the strategy is informed by these existing and committed public transport schemes, and one of them is East-West Rail and another is the Cambourne to Cambridge public transport scheme, is it not?
Yes, or they've used that there, but they could use the same policy wording for a scheme. It doesn't have to be the scheme.
No, but that is what they have formulated. This is the emerging plan, first proposals. They base their strategy of locating growth at Cambourne to take advantage of specific schemes, and those specific schemes are East-West Rail and, because this is existing and committed, it's not some theoretical, it's existing and committed, that is this scheme which is before this inquiry, isn't it? There's no other existing or committed public transport scheme from Cambourne to Cambridge, is there?
Well, that's because the applicant has worked up that particular scheme rather than an alternative scheme.
It may be, but the local plan, the emerging local plan, has been devised and the strategy proceeds on the basis of this scheme, doesn't it?
Well, I think we have to give limited weight
Can you
to...
just answer that question, please?
Please repeat your question.
Yes. The local plan, the emerging local plan strategy has been worked up and is based upon the applicant scheme which is before this inquiry.
Yes, it just is, for example, this is an exhaustive list.
Yes, but it's based on, in part, this scheme.
Yes, but it could equally be based on the CPPF scheme.
Well, the CPPF scheme is not an existing or committed public transport scheme, is it?
Well, that's because the applicant has chosen to progress this scheme. We'd also note that the councils producing this are also part of the Greater Cambridge Partnership.
And if we look at your proof, and we look at 513, which is where you make your point about limited weight, you say the CPPF alternative would equally meet, it's on page 11, would equally meet the emerging strategy and policies. And by making that statement, you're acknowledging that a public transport scheme between Cambourne and Cambridge is one on which the emerging policy is based, is it not?
Yes, I don't think we disagree with that.
No.
That comes back to our original point about the need for a scheme between Cambourne and Cambridge.
Right, well, we're agreed on that point that the and if we just before we leave the emerging local plan, let's just go to page 100. And we can see at the top of page 100, after the bullet point, the following existing allocation for a new mixed-use development at Cambourne West is proposed to be carried forward, but to be expanded to include the full extent of the planning permission. And then it says, why is this policy needed? And Cambourne has been identified as the location for a new railway station as part of the East-West Rail Scheme to connect Oxford with Cambridge and potentially beyond. So again, policy devised in full knowledge of the proposed East-West Rail Station. Agreed?
Agreed.
Along with the Cambourne to Cambridge public transport scheme being brought forward by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. It provides an opportunity to consider how further development can make the most of these connections, but also make the overall Cambourne area a more sustainable place. So the emerging policy, at the time this document was prepared, seeks to take advantage of and is based upon the scheme which is before this inquiry. Agreed?
Agreed, but I'll repeat my caveat that the Cambridge PPS scheme could also meet that need.
Yeah. If it's a realistic and deliverable scheme.
Correct.
So there's no doubt that the proposal is consistent with the local plan strategy, which you've already agreed.
Yes,
Yep.
no objection to that.
The emerging plan strategy, so far as we know it.
Yeah, I just want to go back to your previous question. You asked, is it compliant with that particular policy around S6 or 7 or whatever it is around Cambourne, not the whole local plan as a whole?
Yes.
You're asking about the whole local plan?
I'm asking about the so the local plan strategy, we're agreed. The emerging plan strategy, which is to locate development in part, not the whole strategy, but an element of the strategy, is to locate development at Cambourne to take advantage of public transport schemes.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify my answer to the previous question, which is yes, I agree, it's for the policy that relates to Bourne Airfield, not the entire local plan, if that makes sense.
Right, but how is it in any way inconsistent with the local plan?
Well, in terms of the harms to the environment and other aspects which I'm sure we'll come on to talk about, then I don't believe it is consistent.
Well, but the purpose of the plan is to promote development in appropriate places, and if a plan promotes a development, let's say a housing scheme, or a housing scheme which is dependent upon a public transport scheme, the plan promotes that scheme having taken the view that the advantages outweigh the disadvantages,
Yes,
doesn't it?
But that particular policy in the current local plan doesn't refer to the scheme, the applicant
No.
scheme. It refers to a scheme, which could be the CPPF alternative, and so it's unclear whether the policy is taken. The scheme hadn't been worked up at the time that was changed, so they couldn't make an assessment of whether it meets the other policy requirements. They would expect any scheme coming forward to meet the policy requirement.
But it's consistent with the strategy of providing a public transport link between Cambourne and Cambridge. That we are agreed
Yes,
on.
yeah.
And in terms of the emerging plan strategy, that is based specifically upon this scheme, isn't it?
I think, I think this is just, a written statement. Given the stage that the emerging local plan is at, I don't think we can read too much credence on this. Our view is that need can also be met by the CPPF alternative. They've decided to refer to the particular scheme in this document.
But leaving aside the weight point, going back to the question,
I mean, I can't dispute that they put that wording in
there.
They did.
And their policy and strategy is based upon, in part, other things, but in part, on the scheme which is before this inquiry. That we can agree. It says the Cambourne to Cambridge public transport scheme being brought forward by the Greater Cambridge Partnership. That is this scheme, isn't it?
It is, yes.
Thank you. Now, those are planning policies. You don't, in your proof of evidence, make specific reference to transport policy, do you?
No, I'm not here to talk about transport policy.
So you're not here to talk about it, but you don't put forward anything to indicate that you disagree with Mr. Baker's evidence that the scheme complies with the local transport policies, do you? Nothing to contradict that?
I don't believe that we have done. But I certainly haven't done, but I've not covered transport policies in my proof.
So you haven't put forward anything to contradict Mr. Baker's view that the local transport policy is complied with by this scheme, have you?
No, other than I'd referred to the evidence that Mr. Bristow gave that he intends to rewrite the local transport.
But it's the current local transport policy, nothing to contradict Mr. Baker's view.
No.
Thank you. Now let's turn, if we can, and we're going to a new subject of carbon emissions, and I don't know whether that's a good time, if you wanted to take a break, because it's going to take a little bit of time on carbon emissions.
I think we have reached our time, so I think that will be good.
Right.
Okay. Thank you. Well, in that case, it's almost 11:40, so we'll take a quarter of an hour break and we'll resume at 11:55. Thank you. We're a minute shy of 11:55, but it looks like everybody's here, so I shall resume the inquiry and ask Mr. Cameron to continue, please.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Littlewood, we're about to go on to carbon, and in your planning balance,
Can I just check carbon, because I thought that was Professor Hurst's evidence.
it's the policy element which Mr. Henderson asked Professor Hurst about policy. She said she didn't deal with policy, so it's the policy consequence that I'm going to ask about, not about the numbers. So am I.
Carry on.
So if you look at your planning balance, which is in the supplementary note, page 6, the thing from yesterday, I'll call it whatever you like, but the thing. Page 6, so it's got climate and greenhouse gas benefits, and you record what Mr. Sensical says about it, and then you say limited harm, and you say the evidence of Professor Hurst is that the scheme will be a net emitter of carbon, and you know that the applicant takes a different view, but for the purpose of your balance, you've assumed that Professor Hurst is right on that. First point, we don't have any quantification from Professor Hurst on the extent of the net emission, do we?
I'm not.
Well, you were here during the evidence, weren't you?
I was, but you understand that it was quite complex. And
Yes.
As a non-mathematician.
Well, you don't put in any figure here, do you? Thank you. Well, let's turn, and you'll remember that Professor Hurst was asked about the approach to be taken in the event that she's right and there is a net emission, and she was asked expressly about the guidance on what happens at that stage, and one looks at strategic fit and so on. And she at that stage said, well, policy wasn't for her. So the only policy person I can ask questions to is you.
Yeah.
So let's just see how we get on the policy. And they're only going to be policy questions. They're not going to be on numbers. Although we may need to look at some numbers in order to apply the policy. But let's just see how we get on. And these are matters which the inspectors and the Secretary of State may well need to look at. So can we start with core document 809, please? Now this is once everybody's got it, it's the national networks national policy statement. So and this is March 2024. Right. And this is not an application for a development consent order. I think we're all aware of that. But can we just go to page 6 in the document and paragraph 1.9? And we see there that road and rail developments, this is a busway rather than a road and rail development, but are also consented through routes other than the NSIP, I don't know whether that's on the acronyms list, but nationally significant infrastructure project regime, such as the Transport and Works Act 1992 and the Town and Country Planning Act 1990. Where schemes come forward under these alternative consenting routes, this national policy statement may be a material consideration in decision making, and whether and to what extent it is will be judged on a case-by-case basis. So, first point is, can we agree that the national policy statement is capable of being a material consideration when considering whether to make a Transport and Works Act order and whether to make a direction?
Sorry, Alan.
It's the kind of thing that happens to me, so
I needed to use my phone in the break and I didn't put it back on. Well, yes, I mean, taken there, obviously that depends on the extent and on a case-by-case basis, but yes, in principle.
Capable of being material. And if we then go to 111, further down the page, the MPS provides policy and guidance on matters such as good scheme design, but the bit I wanted to ask you about is transport decarbonisation. So, transport decarbonisation is a subject covered by this national policy statement, isn't it?
It would appear to be, yes.
Yeah. And if we go to page 61, please. And we go to 541. Operational carbon emissions, which were not operational carbon emissions from some types of national network infrastructure cannot be totally avoided. And given the range of non-planning policies aimed at decarbonising the transport system, government has determined that a net increase in operational carbon emissions is not of itself reason to prohibit the consenting of national network projects or to impose more restrictions on them in the planning policy framework. And then we read on, and we're then dealing with residual at the end of 542. Therefore, approval of schemes with residual carbon emissions is allowable and can be consistent with meeting net zero. However, where the increase in carbon emissions resulting from the proposed scheme are so significant that it would have a material impact on the ability of government to achieve its statutory carbon budgets, the Secretary of State should refuse consent. So, do you agree with this? The mere fact that a scheme, and obviously the applicant's case that it isn't, but if Professor Hurst is right, if the scheme is a net emitter, that mere fact does not immediately indicate refusal.
That's correct, to be part of the planning balance.
Yes, and that's why you put it in your table.
Yeah.
And what one needs to do is to test materiality in the context of the statutory carbon budgets. Now, in terms of carbon budget, Mr. Saunders gave oral evidence on this. Were you here for his evidence?
No, I don't believe I was.
Yeah. So his evidence, just to remind you if you weren't here, was the fourth carbon budget. It is a contributor because there's carbon, you have embodied carbon when you build the scheme. But the contribution is 0.0017%. And then when you get onto the fifth carbon budget and the sixth carbon budget, on his assessment, there is a saving of carbon because of the basis of his analysis, you're saving road miles travelled by other vehicles. And we know that Professor Hurst takes a different view, but that's how the calculation's been done. Are you familiar with that, or is that something that goes...
I'm not familiar with that, no.
So, well, perhaps you're not able to answer this question, but if the scheme has a net carbon benefit, which is the applicant's case, would you agree that it's then consistent with the relevant policies if it's net beneficial?
If it's net beneficial, obviously we contest that it's not.
Yes. Now, if we assume that Mr. Saunders is wrong, or the inspectors take a different view, you would then have to consider the level of emission that you allege, and you haven't quantified that, have you? Because Professor Hurst doesn't give us a figure.
If that's the case, then no, she doesn't.
But if you, I'm going to put this point, and if you're able to answer it, please do, but if you can't, equally, please say so. But this is all a consequence of Professor Hurst's evidence and how it then feeds into the planning balance. Can we just take up core document 11106, which is the technical report on greenhouse gases?
Yeah.
And when we got that, you'll see at page 16 there's a paragraph 5.6 which is headed Assessment against UK carbon budgets and local authority targets, and I'm asking you about UK carbon budget. And
Did you say page 11?
no, I said page 16's PDF. So there's a heading 5.6, Assessment against UK carbon budgets.
Yes, there is.
And then there's a table on the next page, and then there are the figures at 5.6.3 of emissions without mitigation measures, and then there are later figures with mitigation. So if one takes the absolute worst case and you go to page 17, page 16, and you'll see there's a table, summary of predicted carbon impact. So this would be an absolute worst case. You've got capital carbon plus 29,130, additional impacts, vegetation, planting and loss 1910. And I said I wouldn't ask you about maths, so I'm not going to ask you about that. But if one takes an absolute worst case and you assume it's all negative, so it's beyond Professor Hurst's position, and you just say you put all this carbon in as a negative and there are no benefits. Not our case, but the worst case. Now if you did that, you would get a figure, and we know this from the figures that we have for the fourth carbon budget. I mean, it's not, the maths is not entirely accurate here, because if you go down to the next page it's got 31,754 rather than adding the two figures up above. But we're getting to a level of about 0.0016 or 0.0017 of the fourth budget. Now, if that was the figure, and we then go back to core document 8.09,
Core document 809,
yeah, which is
that's national policy.
national networks,
statement.
which we were looking at just now. You've got that. And if the figure was about 0.0017% or 0.0016%, that cannot be said to have a material impact on the carbon budget, can it? It's a very small...
From the UK's carbon.
In the UK's carbon budget.
No, but as an environmentalist, I think pretty much, all developments around the world could take that view that we only make a small contribution and therefore it's not important. But if everyone takes that view, it becomes a problem, and that is, the issue. I'm not disagreeing with you in terms of policy terms, but I think in terms of principle, I think that is one of the arguments that certainly Professor Hurst was trying to make.
But what I'm asking about is the policy, and the policy here is that the Secretary of State should refuse consent if it would have a material impact on the ability of government to achieve its statutory carbon budget. And it wouldn't, would it?
No, I don't think our case is that Secretary of State should refuse the scheme purely on the grounds of carbon budgeting.
Thank you. So what it comes down to is that this is a factor, you say, that goes into the planning balance.
Yeah.
And if the scheme is, as the applicant says, positive, it goes onto the plus side of the balance, correct?
Yeah.
And if you're right, or Professor Hurst is right, it goes onto the negative side of the balance, but because we haven't got any figures, how do we attribute weight to it, or do you just say limited weight?
Limited weight.
Limited. So where we get to is no breach of the policy sufficient to justify refusal. It's a factor that goes into the balance and it's of limited weight. All correct?
Well, we don't have any evidence to say that we can argue that it's more than the limited weight, I think.
No. Well, on the evidence. Yeah. On the evidence, that is your evidence. It's in your table.
Yeah.
So my summary was correct, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes, good. Right, let's move on from carbon to the CPPF alternative, which is probably more familiar territory. Now, I'd like, if I can, to look at the assumptions which lie behind your analysis, and we're going to turn up your proof at, well, let's start with 317 on page 6. I'd like to just establish, if we can, the assumptions you've made which then caused you to support the alternative scheme.
Yes.
So we'll start. So you've assumed, if you look at 317, you commissioned work, Edward Lee was appointed to see if it would be possible to design an in-highway scheme that significantly reduced traffic congestion, improved active travel and avoided significant harm to ecology and heritage, and avoided significant compulsory purchase of land. Those were the parameters for your scheme. Is that right?
That's correct, yes.
And when were you involved in these meetings that Mr. Lee and Mr. Johnson had with what Mr. Johnson describes as the environmentalist, Mr. Woodfield.
In terms of the brief for the Civitrix
Yes.
things, yes, loosely, and obviously I was kind of the heritage person
Right.
having an impact into that.
So you were the... And the aim was that when you say an in-highway scheme, that meant... Did that mean within the existing highway boundaries? Was that the parameter that was set?
Yes, well, I think you could use that in two terms. You could use it very tightly and say within that highway's boundary or adjacent to it. I think the inquiries heard that there is some sort of dispute as to what exactly makes up the highway's boundary. So I think from our point of view was, as you would see it as a member of the public, as the highway's boundary between, hedges on trees on either side, bearing in mind there is some dispute as to, where exactly the highway's boundary is. But we were basing it off the highway's boundary map that we've been provided by the applicant.
But the aim, the CPPF aim, was to try and design a scheme which was within the perceived highway boundary.
That's the starting point, yes.
And
Mr.
if,
Littlewood, I'm not clear what you are taking as the perceived highway boundary, because I think at one stage you referred to the map which shows a green shaded area, and I think before that you referred to between the hedges.
Well, my understanding is that we were supplied by a highways boundary map by the applicant, and that was the basis on what we.
The basis of the plan.
That was the basis of the plan, yeah.
Right. Okay.
so, Mr. Littlewood, just to get this clear, you say supplied with the highways boundary map. What happened was this, wasn't it? That, and perhaps you don't know, but I'll put this to you. You or your colleagues downloaded a map which shows highway boundaries, and you were then supplied with a topographical survey by GCP.
That may be the case. I wasn't involved in
You
the
weren't.
detail.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
We have had discussions, and there is still an outstanding issue which needs to be provided. I think, just to be clear, what I have told you about those plans is not strictly accurate, because I think the chronology is as Mr. Cameron literally just described it then. So I'm just concerned to ensure that if we're going to have any questions about this, I'm not saying we need to resolve this issue right now, but we need to be clear about what the plans were, because it's not the case. I think I indicated to you that CPPF had produced the plan that was used as a basis for the assessment. That was wrong. The plan was, as Mr. Cameron said, a plan which had been produced by CCC and or I presume the applicant. It's labelled Cambridgeshire Highways Plan. So that was a plan we obtained from them, downloaded as a publicly available document. So I don't want you to be misled by what I previously said, which is that we produce these plans, because we didn't. I hope that's a fair summary, Ms. Cameron. I think that accords with what you've just said. But
Well, that's what I've just put. But nothing's going to turn for these questions on the precise boundary shown on that plan. But what Mr. Littlewood has said, and perhaps you can just confirm that the intention was, I use the words perceived, but to design a scheme which fell within the boundary as you see it between the hedges or other features either side of the road, within which lies the carriageway and the verges. Is that what you were trying to do?
Yes, basically. The highway boundary, if you go along that section of road, it's confusing. So, for example, outside the American, the Triple SI, the highway boundary is actually, in the trees. So in some cases the boundary is clearly sort of defined by the hedges, and in other cases it's not clearly defined. And so obviously outside the Triple SI we wanted to keep it as close as possible to the actual carriageway, but the highway boundary is not the same.
Yeah. But your aim was to try and avoid intruding into the boundary features, whether it's Madingley Wood,
yes,
or in front of the American Military Cemetery,
exactly, yeah.
the U
That was
hedge,
the starting point,
so
yes.
on.
Yeah.
And Can we go to 4.1 of your evidence, because this is the summary of your position. So the CPP alternative So our position is that compared to the applicant scheme, an in-highway scheme, and that in-highway you mean as described by me as the perceived highway boundary,
Yes, yeah.
without falling out over precisely where it is.
Yeah.
That overcomes the objections identified to the GCP's in-highway scheme, and those objections are broadly, when you say the GCP's in-highway scheme, this is options A and B in the 2017-18
correct.
consultation.
Yeah, yeah.
And the CPP alternative and active travel route would. And this is what your scheme is intended to achieve. And if we look at one, it will provide an undelayed bus route between St Neots Road and West Cambridge, and provide a faster route than the busway to the M11 as set out in Mr Lee's proof appendix. So aim undelayed bus route, correct?
Yeah.
Going to come back to whether it achieves it in a moment. And then 2, avoid the need for any compulsory acquisition of land for a bus route. That was an aim, wasn't it?
Yes.
Avoid any. And if we just carry on, we're not going to look in detail at all of these, but if you look at 7, large savings on land acquisition and construction costs, including not having to build a new bridge over the M11. That was one of your criteria, wasn't it?
Yes.
And you also wanted to achieve, to avoid any significant impacts on heritage. You tell us that later at 7.5.
Yes.
Yeah, and your contribution was to seek to ensure that harm to the heritage assets, and in particular the American Military Cemetery, Register Park and Garden and Grade 2 star listed building, would be avoided. That was one of your, you've told us, you were the heritage person.
Yes, to avoid significant effects, yes.
Yeah. And also sought 4.14 to avoid harm, so this isn't significant harm, but avoiding harm to Madingley Wood SSSI at 4, and the American Cemetery and neighbouring properties. So that was the aim.
Yes.
So that it wasn't qualified by significant there, was it?
Well, I think it wasn't qualified. In hindsight, I perhaps should have qualified that as significant harm.
And can I just ask you, did you also consider whether, as a criterion to be applied, whether the scheme would be acceptable to those responsible for ensuring safety on highways? Is that one of your criteria?
It's not done here, but it was part, as Mr Johnston gave in his evidence, it was part of the brief that was given to Civitrix.
It is a very important criterion though, isn't it?
I'm sure it is. I'm not a transport professional,
Well,
so
you don't have to be a transport professional, Mr Littlewood, to see that.
I'm sure that road safety is important, yes.
Well, do you think it's important?
Well, yes, I do, yes.
Yes. And for any alternative scheme, it would have to be a safe scheme.
Yes,
You're not
correct.
going to be putting forward an unsafe scheme, are you?
No.
And the people who are the guardians of ensuring safety are the Highways Authority, aren't they?
I presume they are, yes.
Yeah. And therefore, this list should have included providing a safe scheme acceptable to the Highways Authority. That should have been on the list, shouldn't it?
Yeah, I think you're slightly taking this out of the context in which it was written. I think this is a summary of our position. It's not a design guide that was put forward to engineers. So I think you're taking this slightly out of context.
Well, let's just see whether I am. Our position is that the CPP alternative would, and these are all the things it would do,
Yes.
but one of the things it should do you agree, is to achieve a safe scheme.
Yes, I think Mr. Johnson covered that in his proof, but yes.
Yes, but in terms of CPPF, we're giving direction and instructions to the experts, and did that include achieving a safe scheme?
Yes, of course it did.
Right. Now, looking back at the history of CPPF's position, CPPF at the time of the 2017-2018 consultation, and for this we're going to need CD 10608, and we've looked at this before, so should be familiar to everybody.
Is it CD 1068 consultation report?
That's correct. If you go to page 105 in that, (106) in the PDF. Now, you took up your current position with CPPF in 2016, didn't you? So, were you involved in formulating the response to this consultation?
I'll be honest with you, I don't know if I was. That may have been our planning, as I explained before, it may have been our planning committee and planning officer. So I can't honestly recall how closely I was involved at that time.
But CPPF did respond,
Yeah.
and CPPF's position at that time, so there was on-road route A, which was with the near side bus lane. There was on-road route B, which was the central tidal bus lane. And at this time, if we look at the bottom of page 106 PDF, the CPPF opposed the near side bus lane option, and the reasons given were impact on the SSSI and on the heritage assets. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that is right, and that, as I said in my evidence chief with Mr. Parker, we are a heritage and conservation organisation. When we look at planning applications or development proposals, the first thing that we look at, in the same way that Natural England and Historic England do, is what would be the impact on those assets, and we understand the importance of them, and therefore, with the information that I think was presented in the consultation at the time, which was very vague, it was just lines on maps, I think the impression that we were given was that the tidal lane in the middle would be the route which would have the least impact on those, and I think that's why that was our preference at that time. And obviously we were concerned that the inbound lane would cause harm, and so we were expressing our concerns about that. I think in hindsight, perhaps saying objecting was maybe a bit harsh, but could have been more qualified in terms of raising concern and needing more detail. But I think, I think that's our position. I don't think our position has changed over that time, in that, we don't want to cause harm to the SSSI and the American Cemetery.
No. Well, that's and so your position's consistent. You wouldn't be in favour of any scheme which caused an adverse effect on, more than de minimis, on the SSSI or the cemetery.
No, I don't think that's the case. I disagree with you there. I think that when this scheme was put forward, there wasn't really an understanding of some of the other impacts of it. So at the time, Coton Orchard wasn't designated as a county wildlife site. Most people didn't have an understanding of the importance of that site. And so we would take a balanced view, looking at the impacts overall of any particular scheme on the environment and on heritage. Obviously, we're not the proponents of the scheme, we're only responding to it. And so we would make a judgment on which of the options might be best based on their impact on heritage. And it's our strong view that driving a 3-lane road for a county wildlife site is going to be a much greater impact than potentially taking a tiny bit of verge outside a triple SI. You know, they're not comparable. And I think that was the point that Mr. Woodfield was making yesterday.
Well, let's just have a look at we're going to go through the list now of those issues. So should we start with delays? And so one of the objects is to provide an undelayed bus route. And if you have an inbound only bus lane, it provides a bus lane going into Cambridge but not out. I mean, that's
correct, yes.
So can we take up the transport assessment, which is core document 12501, please?
Sorry, the core document
12501. When you've got that.
Yeah.
And in that, if you can go to page 37, please. And you'll remember that I think the inspectors asked Mr. Lee about congestion issues on the westbound.
That's correct, yeah.
And so if we just have a look at page 37, that deals with the PM peak. And if you look down that list, that's a list of junctions which have ratios of flow to capacity at greater than 100%, so congestion. And if you look down the list, we have the A1303 Madingley Road westbound junction with St Neots Road. Do you see that? That's about halfway down.
Yeah.
That is the Madingley Mulch roundabout, isn't it?
That's correct, yeah.
And that's the point on the network that Mr. Lee was referring to. So that is a congestion point.
Well, that's the CSRM predicting
Yes.
that. That's not actual data. Mr. Lee in his evidence provided actual data.
Yeah. But this is Mr. Lee
This is a
provided,
model which you're aware that we can test.
yes, you can test the model series.
Exactly, and the outputs from it. So you're basically saying, you know, we disagree fundamentally on this point, I think, as I'm not going to agree with
Mr.
you.
Littlewood, you disagree with the use of the model, but you don't disagree because Mr. Lee told the inspectors expressly that there is congestion outbound, is going west at the Madingley Mulch roundabout.
I don't think he referred to it as congestion.
He referred to delays.
Well, it's minor delay. It's a roundabout. You know, vehicles coming to a roundabout, they slow down. There's backup. That's not congestion if you're held up by a minute or two.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but again, before we go down any further down this route, I'm slightly concerned. These are questions which really probably should have been put to either Mr. Lee or Mr. Johnston. Secondly, no part of the applicant's case that an outbound bus lane is needed on the transport modelling. That point was put very clearly, and there's nothing in the written evidence to ever have disputed that. So I am concerned if Mr. Cameron, where he wants to get to with this is actually there is a need for an outbound bus lane and the transport modelling supports that, there is not a basis for that case, and I'd be very concerned if that was now, if the applicant was now going to pivot to that position.
No, the question I'm asking is about one of the criteria is for an undelayed bus route. That's one of that's at 4.11 of Mr. Littlewood's evidence.
That's fine, but there are no outbound delays to justify the provision of an outbound bus route. The applicants never suggested that there are, and there's no reference to any transport modelling in any of my witnesses
I'm
to put
asking
the point.
Mr. Littlewood about the CPPF scheme, and the CPPF scheme relies on an on-road scheme going west, which goes to the Madingley Mulch roundabout. So I'm entitled to ask him about whether his scheme achieves the objective which he set for it.
Well, according to Mr. Lee, it does.
Well, I think this coming. If you can ask ask the question, and if Mr. Littlewood isn't in a position to respond to it, then,
Yeah. So, Mr. Littlewood, if the aim is, and you say that it is, to produce an undelayed bus route, and that applies both ways, your scheme does not address any delays that there may or may not be going westbound, does it?
I think you're taking this completely out of context as to how it was written in my proof of evidence. No, I didn't say that in my proof of evidence. I've set out a comparison between the two schemes, and what we're saying is that, as Mr. Parker's just pointed out, that there's no outbound congestion. There's not a need for that. That's followed by Mr. Lee. You're not contesting that, and therefore traffic is undelayed. The fact that there might be a few cars at the same time coming to a roundabout, as would normal traffic, it doesn't count as a delay. That was not in our definition of. If you're saying there'll only be one vehicle at a time travelling up Madingley Hill, and therefore when it gets to the roundabout it can go straight round, then then I don't think that was not implied by what we were doing. So no, I don't agree with you.
So undelayed means lack of delay, doesn't it? Undelayed.
If we're going to
Well, does it mean no delay?
That's not the point we were making here.
Well, I'm not asking you about your point. I'm asking you about the words. So can we just go to the words? Provide an undelayed bus route.
Well, if
Was that the object of your scheme?
Is it an uncongested route?
Your words undelayed.
Well, I'm happy to say that, what we mean is traffic congestion, vehicles being unduly held up, not vehicles coming to a roundabout, and there might be some vehicles in front of them.
But if you're going to provide an undelayed route, it has to be undelayed both ways, doesn't it?
Well, I believe...
Do you agree?
I believe in the terms that we mean undelayed, that it's undelayed.
Right. So if there is no capacity at the junction at Madingley Mulch, and Mr. Lee referred to this as a congestion, as a point where there are delays westbound, because he was asked expressly about this, your scheme does not seek to resolve that issue. Can we agree that?
I think that is the case, but I'm not the transport expert. That really is a question that you should have put to Mr. Lee and Mr. Johnson.
Yeah.
But also the applicant's position is that there are not any delays to justify an outbound bus lane, and that point has never been put to Mr. Lee. So insofar as my own friend is going to take the point in closing that is not a matter which is addressed by this scheme, that has never been a point which is made and has not been made to the relevant witnesses. So I do put a marker down now that it will not be appropriate in closing for Mr. Cameron to say, well, this scheme is not one which addresses outbound delays, because it's just not appropriate.
Well,
I think you've asked the question of Mr. Littlewood. I think I understand the point, but I think Mr. Parker's also right in terms of the evidence that they presented around the aims. So I think we've sort of got the point on that.
So make plain now that our submissions at the close will be based on the evidence, and the evidence includes the written evidence and the oral evidence, and it includes the evidence that Mr. Lee gave, I think the answer, I can't remember whether it was to Mr. Clegg or to you, sir, on that point of delay westbound. And that is the point that I'm pursuing in relation to the alternative scheme. which is said to create an underlaid bus route. That is as far as it goes.
Okay, I'll review my notes, but as well as what Mr. Lee said, he said there was no justification for an outbound bus lane, no transport assessment to support the need for an outbound bus lane, and that the applicant had never suggested that there was a need for an outbound bus lane. So I just note those things as well, but I don't want to. You have my point.
Well, I think I understand where you both come from. So I think can we move on?
We can, and so I will move on in the questions. But this transport assessment, I know the CPPF don't agree with it, but it's been there for all to see, and it identifies ratios of flow to capacity above 100% at particular junctions, including that junction. And it then gives a prediction as well. So it's all there, it's in the evidence. So let's just...
I'm sorry again to interrupt, just in terms of time. I don't know where we're getting to. But I'm just conscious of Mr.
Yes. Well, shall we just go on to one more subject, or if you want to stop there, we'll stop there, but we've got quite a way to go.
Well, my sort of approximate note was that 12:40 was the next time to have a
There we go.
to have a break. I think now would be an appropriate time to perhaps break for lunch. I'm just going to have a quick chat with Mr. Clegg. Yeah, I was just checking with Mr. Clegg there. I think because we've had sort of a few breaks through the morning, hopefully it's not going to cause people too much difficulty if we had a slightly shorter lunch break. So I'm going to suggest that we resume at 1:15. Hopefully that will give me enough time to get to Morrison's to get my sandwich. So.
Yeah, I see Mr. Littlewood nodding, so he's the person I'm concerned about, but yeah.
I mean, just in terms of times, I understood in terms of the sort of breaks, we were still on track in terms of the schedule. Yeah. So.
Yes, but in terms of getting through Mr. Littlewood's evidence, I think that's probably a question for Mr. Camp.
No. Yeah, sorry, it wasn't scheduled. Anyway, let's. I think that's okay. Let's adjourn now, and we'll resume it.
So I think there is a danger that we won't complete Mr. Littlewood's evidence today, because Mr. Abkin Reitner's also got cross-examination as well. So, and I don't think we're going to fit that in, as well as I can tell you that I'm less than halfway through my notes.
Well, we'll still break now. Obviously, any reflection over lunchtime on that, and I'll have a think about that as well. Thank you. So we'll resume at 1:15. Thank you.